What's up? I'm Lily. Revenge Crown brings you the stories that keep you hooked. If that sounds good, smash subscribe and let's go. That's interesting because the ring is already in a safety deposit box. Under my wife's name, solely, the ballroom smelled like gardenias and champagne, sweet and expensive. String lights draped from the ceiling like fallen stars. And 200 guests sat at round tables covered in ivory linen, waiting for the toast to begin. My mother stood near the head table, microphone in hand, her champagne flute catching the light. She'd started her speech beautifully. Talked about watching me grow up, about being proud, about welcoming Marcus into the family. Then her tone shifted, became lighter, more casual. And speaking of family traditions, she said, smiling at the crowd, we've decided your grandmother's ring should go to your sister instead. The room didn't gasp. Rooms never do in real life. They just get quieter, conversations pausing mid-sentence, forks lowering to plates. My sister Claire, 26, wearing blush pink silk that made her look angelic, smiled from her seat at the bridal party table. It matches my engagement better anyway. She held up her left hand, showing off the modest diamond her fiancé had given her 3 months ago. The gesture was performative, practiced. She'd probably rehearsed it. Marcus set down his champagne glass with deliberate care. The sound of crystal meeting wood carried farther than it should have. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost conversational, but it cut through the room like a knife through silk. That's interesting, because the ring is already in a safety deposit box. Under my wife's name, solely, my mother's smile froze. The microphone in her hand wavered slightly. And, Marcus continued, standing now, his hand finding mine under the table. Any attempt to claim it will be considered theft. We have documentation. Would you like to see it? I was the resource. That's what I've been my entire life, though nobody ever used that word. They called me responsible, mature, the strong one. What they meant was available. My grandmother, my father's mother, died when I was 19. She'd been a quiet woman who collected antique jewelry and kept butterscotch candies in her pockets. When she got sick, I was the one who sat with her in the hospital, missing college classes to hold her hand while my mother worked and Claire had cheerleading practice. You were always her favorite, my grandmother said one afternoon, her voice thin and papery. She pressed something into my palm. This is for you. For when you find someone worth keeping. The ring was Art Deco platinum with a square-cut sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. Not huge, not flashy, but elegant in a way that whispered rather than shouted. The kind of ring that increased in value not just monetarily but historically, each year adding weight to its story. When you get married, she whispered, wear this. And remember you're worth more than they tell you. She died 2 days later. At the funeral, my mother asked about the ring. Your grandmother would want it to stay in the family, she said carefully. We should keep it somewhere safe. Translation. Give it to me so I can control it. I was 19 and grieving and didn't have the language yet for what was happening. So I nodded and handed it over, and my mother placed it in her jewelry box for safekeeping until I was older. I didn't see it again for 9 years. By the time I was 28, I'd built something my family knew nothing about. I was a software developer for a healthcare company, designing systems that helped hospitals track patient information. The work was technical, challenging, well paid. I had an apartment in a good neighborhood, a retirement account that was actually funded, and a social circle that included people who didn't need anything from me. I had Marcus, whose family treated dinner invitations like invitations, not summons. And I had Elena, a legal aide I'd met at a networking event, who'd become a friend, and eventually someone I trusted with the truth about my family. They're going to try something at your wedding, Elena said 6 weeks before the ceremony, sitting across from me at a coffee shop near my office. People like that always do. Big audience, emotional moment, social pressure to comply. I know. So let's make sure you're protected. She helped me draft a document simple, clear, legally sound. It stated that my grandmother's ring, which had been gifted to me directly and was currently in my parents' possession, was my sole property. Any attempt to transfer ownership without my written consent would constitute theft. The hard part was getting the ring back. I went to my parents' house on a Tuesday afternoon when I knew my mother would be at her book club. My father answered the door, surprised. Just needed to grab something, I said, moving past him into the house. Your mother's not here. I know. That's why I came now. I walked straight to their bedroom, to the cherrywood jewelry box on my mother's dresser. My father followed, confused and increasingly uncomfortable. What are you doing? Taking back my grandmother's ring. I opened the box, found it in the second drawer, exactly where I remembered. The sapphire caught the afternoon light streaming through the window. Your mother is holding something that doesn't belong to her. I closed my hand around the ring. Grandma gave this to me. Not to the family, to me. My father's face did something complicated. He looked older suddenly, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. This is going to cause problems. It already is a problem. I'm just solving it. I walked out with the ring in my pocket and didn't look back. The next day, Elena and I went to Marcus's bank and opened a safety deposit box in my name only. We placed the ring inside along with the notarized document she'd prepared. Elena took photos of everything for our records. Your family's going to notice it's gone, she said as we left the bank.
I know. They'll ask about it.
Probably demand it back. Let them. Elena smiled. You've gotten good at this. At what? Choosing yourself, my mother called 3 days later. Your grandmother's ring is missing, she said without preamble. No, it's not. I have it. Silence on the other end. Then, you took it from my jewelry box. I took back what was mine. Grandma gave it to me 9 years ago. You've been holding it hostage ever since. Hostage? Her voice pitched higher. I was keeping it safe. You were keeping it controlled. There's a difference. We were going to give it to you eventually. When? After you decided I'd earned it? After I'd been useful enough? More silence. I could picture her in their kitchen, perfume heavy in the air, trying to find the angle that would make me feel guilty enough to comply. Claire is getting married soon too, my mother said finally. The ring would mean so much to her. Then her fiancé can buy her one. That's cruel. That's boundaries. I hung up before she could respond. The wedding planning was beautiful and exhausting in equal measure. Marcus and I chose a historic ballroom, downtown, tall ceilings, crystal chandeliers, windows that overlooked the city lights. His parents helped with costs, not as obligation but as gift. My parents contributed too, though every check came with subtle reminders of their generosity. Claire was my maid of honor because refusing would have caused the kind of scene I did and have energy for. She complained about the bridesmaid dress color, the shoe height, the scheduling of the bridal shower. But she showed up and she smiled in photos, and I told myself that was enough. My mother threw herself into wedding planning like a performance piece. She had opinions about flowers, seating charts, menu selections. She introduced herself to vendors as mother of the bride with emphasis that suggested ownership. But she didn't mention the ring again. I should have known that meant she was planning something. The wedding day itself was perfect. I wore a dress I'd found at a boutique specializing in vintage-inspired designs, ivory silk, with delicate beading, elegant without trying too hard. Marcus wore a charcoal suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a classic film. We said our vows in the ballroom under the chandeliers, 200 people watching us promise forever. I wore my grandmother's ring on my right hand. A small rebellion, a visible reminder. My mother's eyes tracked it during the ceremony. I watched her notice it, watched her face do something complicated, watched her lean toward my father and whisper something I couldn't hear. The reception was everything we'd hoped for: good food, better music, people we loved filling the space with laughter and bad dancing and genuine joy. Marcus's best man gave a toast that made everyone cry laugh. Claire gave a toast that was mostly about herself, but technically counted as supportive. Then my mother stood up, champagne flute in hand, and asked for the microphone. She started well. Talked about watching me grow up, about being proud of the woman I'd become, about welcoming Marcus into our family. Her voice had that practiced quality she used for audiences, warm and maternal, and just slightly too loud. Marriage is about joining families, she said, smiling at the crowd. About sharing traditions and creating new ones together. Around the room, guests nodded, smiled, reached for their drinks. And speaking of family traditions, my mother's tone shifted, became lighter, more casual. Like she was about to share something delightful. We've decided your grandmother's ring should go to your sister instead. The room got quieter. I felt Marcus's hand find mine under the table, his grip steady. Claire stood from her seat at the bridal party table, holding up her left hand to show off her engagement ring. It matches my engagement better anyway. Her smile was practiced, bright, performative. My mother continued, as if this were perfectly reasonable. The sapphire would complement Claire's diamond beautifully, and since she's getting married in the spring. Marcus set down his champagne glass. The sound carried. He stood, still holding my hand, his expression calm but his voice carrying steel underneath. That's interesting because the ring is already in a safety deposit box. Under my wife's name, solely. My mother's smile flickered. I'm sorry? The ring our grandmother gave to her 9 years ago, Marcus said clearly, is secured in a safety deposit box under sole ownership. Any attempt to claim it will be considered theft. The room was properly quiet now. Phones half raised at distant tables. The band had stopped playing between songs and hadn't started again. We have documentation, Marcus continued. Legal documentation, notarized. Would you like to see it? My mother's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, embarrassment, anger. The champagne flute trembled slightly in her hand. Claire's smile cracked. You can't be serious. Extremely serious, I said, standing now too. My voice didn't shake. Grandma gave me that ring when I was 19. You've been holding it hostage for 9 years. I took it back 3 weeks ago, and it's legally secured in my name. It's not up for discussion. This is insane, Claire said, her voice pitching higher. Over a ring? This isn't about the ring, Marcus said calmly. It's about the pattern. My father stood from his seat, hands raised in a peacekeeping gesture that fooled nobody. Can we not do this here? In front of everyone? You started this in front of everyone, I said quietly. You made it public. You used my wedding as a stage for this announcement. I'm just setting the record straight. My mother tried to regroup. She smoothed her dress, tried to resurrect her smile. Sweetheart, you're being dramatic. We're family. We share things. Help isn't theft, I said. And family isn't access. Boundaries, absolutely. The silence that followed was the kind that makes people uncomfortable. Wedding guests looked at their plates, at each other, anywhere but at us. The string quartet by the stage stood frozen, uncertain whether to start playing again. Marcus's father appeared beside us, tall, gray-haired, wearing a kind expression and an expensive suit. He placed himself between my mother and me, not aggressively, just present. I think this conversation would be better continued privately, he said gently. Perhaps you'd like to step outside. My mother looked around the room at 200 faces watching her, at the phone still half raised, at the social performance crumbling in real time. She set down the microphone with shaking hands and walked toward the exit. Claire followed, pink silk trailing. My father lingered, looking at me like I was a stranger. You've changed, he said quietly. No, I replied. I just stopped pretending. He left without another word. The reception continued, though the energy had shifted. People were careful around us for the rest of the night, offering sympathetic smiles and carefully worded support. Marcus's family surrounded us with steady, undemanding presence. His mother hugged me in the bathroom and said, simply, I'm proud of you. We left at 11, earlier than planned but not fleeing. We walked out together, hand in hand, to the car his parents had helped us buy, because in his family, gifts didn't come with invisible price tags. My phone started buzzing before we reached the parking lot, text messages. Dozens of them. From my mother, from Claire, from my father, from aunts and uncles I barely knew, all demanding explanations or offering unsolicited opinions about family loyalty and wedding day behavior. 63 messages by midnight. I turned off my phone. Are you okay? Marcus asked as we drove through the city, downtown lights reflecting off wet streets. I thought about it. About the weight I'd been carrying for 28 years, so constant I'd stopped noticing it was there. About how it felt lighter now. I think so, I said. I think I'm finally done apologizing. Marcus squeezed my hand. Good. 2 weeks later, my phone stayed mostly silent. The initial flood of messages had slowed, then stopped. My mother called once at 3 a.m., which I didn't answer. Claire sent a long text about how I'd humiliated her in front of everyone, How I was selfish and cruel and had ruined what should have been a celebration of family. I didn't respond. Extended family reached out with varying degrees of judgment and support. My father's sister called to say she understood. Your mother has always been that way with that ring, she said carefully. Some of us wondered if you'd ever see it. Elena texted, proud of you. Coffee next week? Marcus's parents invited us for Sunday dinner. No obligations, no performance required, just family that actually functioned like family should. I sat in our apartment, officially ours now, both names on the lease, and felt the silence settle around me like peace instead of threat. They're not calling anymore, I said to Marcus one evening. No, he agreed. They're not. Does that make me a bad daughter? He looked up from his book. Does it feel like it makes you a bad daughter? I considered that. The phone that didn't ring. The absence of manufactured crises that always required my immediate attention. The space where guilt used to live, now occupied by something that felt suspiciously like freedom. No, I said slowly. It feels like boundaries. Then you're not a bad daughter. You're just a daughter with boundaries. A month after the wedding, I took my grandmother's ring out of the safety deposit box. Marcus came with me to the bank, waited while I signed the forms and retrieved the small velvet box from its secure location. We sat in his car in the parking lot while I opened it, the sapphire catching afternoon sunlight and throwing blue shadows across my palm. She told me I was worth more than they told me, I said quietly. She was right. I wish she could see this, see me standing up for myself. Marcus took my hand. I think she'd be proud. I wore the ring that evening to dinner with friends, people who'd become chosen family, who celebrated boundaries instead of punishing them. It felt right on my hand, like something I'd been waiting my whole life to claim, not just the ring. The autonomy it represented, the refusal to be a resource. The understanding that love doesn't require sacrifice to prove itself. 6 months later, Claire sent me a single text message. Mom says I should apologize. I stared at it for a long time before responding. Do you think you should apologize? No response. I didn't expect one. My parents haven't reached out directly. They send messages through relatives, hints through mutual friends, suggestions that maybe it is time to move past this and be the bigger person. But being the bigger person always meant being smaller than I was. Meant folding myself into shapes that made everyone comfortable except me. I'm done with that. Marcus and I are building something different. A life where boundaries aren't betrayals, where saying no doesn't require justification. Where family means people who love you as you are, not as they need you to be. I think about my grandmother sometimes. About the ring she gave me with its instruction to remember my worth. About how she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself yet. I wear her ring on special occasions, on normal days too, sometimes. A reminder that I get to keep what's mine. That gifts given with love don't come with conditions. That I'm allowed to protect what matters. Boundaries don't destroy families, they define them. The people who love you will respect them. The people who don't, well, that tells you everything you need to know. If you've ever had to draw a line with someone who called it love, you're not alone. If you've ever been told that protecting yourself was selfish, that boundaries were betrayal, that family meant access you deserved better. You get to keep what's yours, you get to say no. You get to build something better than what you were given. And when you finally stop apologizing for taking up space, for wanting respect, for expecting reciprocity instead of exploitation, that's not cruelty. That's survival. That's freedom. That's choosing yourself. You don't owe anyone your peace, not even family. Especially not family who mistakes your kindness for weakness and your boundaries for betrayal. Share your story if you need to. You're not alone. And you're worth more than they told you.